Hello guys, I am Naman Devariga from Educate Tutorials, one of the faculty members of the Educate Tutorials, and today we are going to cover the topic or cover the chapter, to be more precise, how to organism reproduce, which is a part of NCERT CBSE board for 11th standard. Pardon me for writing it 12th standard in the slide, so you can actually ignore that. So let us begin with our chapter by usual introduction. Now, why do organisms reproduce? Why there is a need of reproduction? Reproduction is not necessary to maintain any form of life like nutrition, unlike any process such as respiration, nutrition or excretion. It is not a compulsion for a life to actually reproduce to remain sustainable or for make a living. Actually, on the flip side, the reproduction involves large expenditure of time and energy. But then too, why do we reproduce? Take 2 minutes to think and postulate your own answers in your mind. What do you think? Why do we need to reproduce? Now, do organisms create exact copies of themselves? Now, when we are seeing organisms, like we see humans to be taken as an example, we have 2 eyes, we have 2 ears, we have 1 mouth, and so on. Each and every cell is actually a carbon copy of the another cell. Now, each organisms are blueprint of each other. Every organism has same type of cell. They show same cell physiology, which is the actual structure, and the function of all the living organism in this earth is same. Then too, we see changes. We can differentiate what is a cat, what is a dog, what is a human, what is an insect, what is a bacteria, and so on. Now, this is the result of changes which occur in our blueprints, or to be more precise, the map of our cell, and these changes are known as variation. Now, in living organism, the DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid, is the blueprint which is required for reproduction in living organisms. Now, there is a thing which is known as central dogma, where DNA converts into mRNA. mRNA then produces protein, and in this way, from protein the cell functions further in the action. Now, during cell reproduction, the copy of DNA is not sufficient for a new cell to survive, and so therefore the DNA has to replicate itself so that it can be given to the next copy or to the next generation of cells. Now, what is the importance of variation? Why do we need variation? Now, the population of each organisms are adapted to different kinds of ecosystem like land, water and air. To be more precise, when we are seeing ourselves, we are adapted to live in land, but we are not adapted to live in water. So, different organisms show different kinds of habitat. A bird, which usually is an aerial organism which stays in the sky, and fish, which are aquatic, and so on and so forth. Now, each organisms in an habitat have a or in a niche in an ecosystem have similar blueprints. Like in case of cats, when we are seeing cats, cat is a family, and in family of cats we have lion, tiger, panther, cheetah, and so on, and those are adapted to the niche of forest or in grasslands. Now, in case of ecosystems, some things are uncontrollable and some things are controllable like the population of the organisms and so forth, but there are some uncontrollable elements such as temperature, pH, humidity, pressure, which cannot be actually controlled by the organisms, and it is a due of the nature. Now, the drastic changes in these parameters can decrease the chance of survival and can even completely destroy the whole community. But the variations in these similar organisms helps in adaptation to different kinds of habitat, niche, or to be more precise, ecosystem. Each variation creates a new ability for an organisms to have a greater advantage to the other organisms and to survive. Now let us start with our main topic, or the main focus of the topic, which is modes of reproduction. Now the modes of reproduction is generally divided into asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. The asexual reproduction involves only one parent, whereas sexual reproduction involves two parents or the fusion of two gametes or more in some cases. But in this topic or in this video, we are only going to cover what is the meaning of asexual reproduction, and we will see the different kinds of asexual reproduction. Now in this asexual reproduction, as I mentioned earlier, it is nothing but only one parent or only one organism is involved in the reproduction. So it is usually seen in the lower animals and lower kingdoms or lower organisms, which are not highly complex or that well developed compared to higher animals or organisms. Now in asexual reproduction, we are going to cover 6 topics: fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, vegetative propagation, and spore formation. Fission. What is this kind of reproduction is usually seen in bacteria, protists, and fungi, and the mechanism behind the reproduction is not that complex like higher animals. It is nothing but one is broken down into two, and this process is known as binary fission, where one cell is divided into two equal kinds of cells. In case of it happens usually the example is well illustrated by amoeba and other bacteria. Now here they have also given an example of leishmania, which is a parasite which causes Kala-Azar disease. The separation occurs in a different orientation, slightly transverse, or the whip end is actually broken into two, as you can see in the figure on your right side of the slide. Now the upper diagrams defines the binary fission in amoeba, where you can see it is divided into two by irregular fashion, but in the bottom part of the image you can see that the binary fission in the leishmania, the whip ends are actually involved in the fission. Now there is also a third kind of fission, which is multiple fission. The example of multiple fission is usually seen in malarial parasites, or the scientific name is known as Plasmodium vivax. The whole cell forms a cyst around itself, which is a hard covering, and the cell inside it replicates until the whole cell is occupied. On favorable condition, this cell brokens and the whole inner cell gets dispersed out. Now let us move on to the second part, or the second mode of asexual reproduction, which is fragmentation. The word fragmentation itself means to break down into many pieces, or broken pieces to be more precise. The example of fragmentation, the organisms which adopts fragmentation is Spirogyra, simply because they have limited types of cells and are not complex in nature like any other cells. So here the basic funda is that there is only one kind of cell, so there is no problem to actually regenerate that single kind of cell, other than having multiple and differentiated kind of cells. Now in this form of reproduction, when the Spirogyra gets matured, it gets broken down into pieces, and the pieces then regenerates, or it forms, or it outgrows like a normal plant, and it forms a whole new Spirogyra. This is known as fragmentation, where the reproduction is due to the fragmentations of the organisms. The next part of the reproduction is regeneration. Now in case of regeneration, the organism have the capability or has the ability to transform or to form a whole new organism from a part of a body of itself. Now the whole new organism can be broken or can be lacerated. Lacerated means can be cutted down, and from that cutted parts the whole new organisms can be made up. Now that you can see in the picture that how a planaria is broken down into three pieces and how each individual piece is leading to a formation of a whole new planaria. Now here there is also one another example which is hydra, but actually it is not considered under the regeneration, and students should not get confused where the hydra belongs. The hydra actually adapts the mode of asexual reproduction in case of budding, which we will see in the next slide. Now here the regeneration is carried out by specialized cells which have the capability to differentiate into different kinds of cells. When I am saying differentiated into new kinds of cell, the meaning is that take your own example. Your skin has a different cell, your heart has a different cell, your muscles has a different cell, your bones have different cells. So similarly, tissues are made up of differentiated cells. So here in case also regenerative cells, specialized cells can differentiate into many kinds of cells. Now as I mentioned before, the budding and regeneration have a key difference in between them. The next one is budding. In case of budding, the regeneration in case of hydra we will see. Now as you can see in the image, it is like a hand which is growing out. Now in hydra, when a hydra is getting matured or it is grown well enough, a small outgrowth is, you can say, it is grown out of from a part of the whole hydra body, and that bud grows with increase in nutrition uptake, and that at a certain point that bud becomes so enlarged that it detaches itself and it separates out as a new hydra. That outgrowth is known as bud, which you can see in this image. Now in this time, as I mentioned before, the bud matures, it takes nutrition from the parent body, it grows, detaches itself, and the process continues with the next generation. Now let us move on to the next one, which is vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation can be seen in our day-to-day life, like in case of potatoes, where you can see the eyes of potatoes and they have and you can see that it sometimes leaves structures of leaves are grown from that eye. Now here usually the plants which are unable to produce seeds or which are unable to reproduce asexually grow themselves or reproduce themselves by growing a new plantlet from various parts of stem, fruits, leaves, and so on. This process is very similar to budding, but this process is known as vegetative propagation, which is seen only in the plant kingdom. Now as I said, as you can see in the image, there is a bigger leaf, and from that bigger leaf two plantlets are growing out. We have n number of examples which we can see, like in case of ginger, onion, sweet potatoes, and so on. Now this property of the plant of vegetative propagation involves two techniques when you are using it in agriculture, like grafting and layering, where a new plantlet can be generated from a parent plant, and because of this, plants which does not produce seeds like banana, orange, rose, jasmine can be cultivated in large fields which are unable to reproduce cells. Now let us move on to the last topic of this session, which is spore formation. Now the spore formation is exclusively seen in fungal family or the fungal kingdom, where fungus is, you can say, we can see them much more in high number during rainy seasons, when the moisture in the air and the humidity is well enough to grow, and we can see them growing in different garlics, breads in form of molds. Now the basic fungus reproduce by forming seeds like structures, and these seeds are known as spores, which you can in image, the small dots are nothing but your spores. These spores are actually enclosed in a spherical body which is known as sporangium, and during favorable conditions, when this like heat, when it finds that there is, when the fungal cell detects that the cell has enough nutrients, enough moisture content and all in its surrounding, the sporangium breaks open and the spores are dispersed in the air to reproduce in that environment rich, nutrient rich environment. And with this we conclude with our asexual reproduction, and in next session we will continue with our sexual reproduction and we will move further with the topic and the chapter. Goodbye, have a nice day.